morning. Oh, not yet. Come on, baby. Good morning, everybody. John Sviokla here for GAI Insights, our Gen AI news briefing, rating the important news of the day as essential, important, or optional. We got some amazing new stuff here, and we're joined by Luda, Paul, and delighted to introduce David Yakubovich. David, I can't think of a better guest rater than today. David's background is he started his education as a finance, IT, and statistics major at Florida University, then went to the University of Illinois Springfield, where he got his MS in computer science and is currently an AI fellow at Columbia University, and has been a successful founder, person at 5 different startups, 2 exited well, now runs a VC firm, and has had a 5-year podcast on humane AI, the ethical use of data and AI. So with this meta announcement, it's fantastic to have you here, David. Welcome. It's great to be with you.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me on the show, John, Paul, and Luda. Excited to share some thoughts today.
Awesome.
Great.
Ankash, man, we got some really rocking stuff today. We got meta, we got lawyers getting automated, and we got all kinds of things happening. A little bit of rag info, which doesn't seem that interesting, but I don't want to prejudice the Raiders. Here we go. All right, Ankash, start us off.
Thanks, John. So the first one that we have is the big one. So the latest Llama 3.1 405 billion model from Meta. So this is the biggest and the best open source AI model yet in the market.
Yeah, unbelievable release here. 405 billion parameters in the big model. Luda, what do you think?
I think we need to rate it as essential. We've been talking about open source private models for a while, and it is a release that I think is very important and essential. The most fascinating thing that they've been installed. So you can now for sure train your own
Luda, we're losing your audio.
Okay, you can fine train your own models and do it better. So I think it's essential.
Essential. Awesome. Other thoughts?
Yeah, it's hands down, this is essential. I'm a big advocate of all things open source, but I want to make it clear this is not fully open source because we don't know about all the weights and the bias for the model. I think at the end of the day, you need someone to take the lead pack in the open source industry, much like we've seen Linux become the underlying operating system for cloud technology today. We think 20, 30 years down the road, could Meta's models like 3.1 or 20 years, maybe 10.1, could these be leading the way to reduce cost? I think it's essential. A lot of companies are going to be looking for it as an alternative for the closed source models.
David, the announcement says, I didn't check it, that they did release the weights. So if that is really true, it is quite open source. Fine-tune on that.
Yeah, I think in this one, what's going to happen, we're going to see in the next couple of weeks truly what is released. The training data, it's locked away, right? So I think the challenge becomes, you got half of it released. It's a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Most companies, like the notable AI companies that we all use and every single day, none of them even release the weights, let alone the training data. I think it's a secret sauce. Meta, one could guess what their training data is. Might be things that we use each and every day. So it's all right. It's all right. But I think that the challenge becomes, if we think of the future in 2050, it's going to be trillions of devices online. Are we all going to be spending real-time inference where we're going to spend subscription dollars on models on device? We're going to need some open source alternative. And you could think to the database world, how Postgres took over the world, free databases for everyone. Perhaps the Meta Llama will be a similar approach.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting too when you look at one of the the early applications about being able to try on different looks for your picture. I mean, in terms of doing that in their platform businesses, Instagram, Facebook, and so forth, huge uptick. That visual data, it's half the price they claim to run this model, which is a big deal. And I think that his note his partnerships are deep. And the other thing is that, you know, what Grok is doing is very interesting when you combine it with open source, right? I mean, this whole move by Grok, where they're going to have, you know, they've got 100,000 LPUs, language processing units, right, deployed already. They're going for 1.7 million, according to their CEO, who I heard speak recently. So they're going to commoditize inference, and they're using much cheaper technology. They're using 14 nanometer, you know, chips and so forth, and super focused on that. And, you know, that plus, you know, Grok's new, you know, supercomputer, I think we're going to see very interesting price performance out of Grok, and that plus the Llama models, I think it's going to really give the, you know, the big model companies a headache from a price and a performance standpoint. So it's going to be, it's, you know, game on.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we can't forget that that's been a lot of the driver in NVIDIA's growth for their business the last couple of years, data centers. So could, for example, XAI just 2 days ago in Memphis, as you mentioned, their 100,000 compute, largest AI compute cluster in the world went online. The money and the business opportunity is not from training the models. It's going to be on the inference layer, and that's just getting started.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I think, you know, Musk's strategy there is just, I think, brilliant. I mean, commoditize the inference layer, because when you think about chips, they're kind of like oil. They trade either at value if they're in short supply, or at cost if they're in bountiful supply, right? Just like the oil market. And so right now, those, you know, NVIDIA chips are trading at value. And, you know, once you get enough capacity on inference, and I haven't got a good number yet, I was kicking around with some other, you know, analysts, how much of the demand is training versus inference. And we were guessing it, you know, it's at least half on inference, if not 2/3. So if Grok commoditizes that level and gives you a way better price performance, that's going to be interesting. And then you get the Llama models on top of that. Game on.
Yeah.
One other thing I would just note too, that you know, Meta's certainly been not perceived as an enterprise player, but this announcement does include involvement with NVIDIA, AWS, and Databricks, and those vendors are enterprise. So it is game on, and I think for the AI leader, just a continued incredible, robust set of technology choices. And David, boy, you need to make sure that you are building in, your team is building in LLM flexibility and switchability next 2-3 years. Do not get locked into models, because stuff is coming quickly.
And don't forget Deloitte. I mean, Deloitte's in there as well. And the other thing is, I think people are underestimating, as we talk to leading AI practitioners, Gen AI practitioners that actually have big systems in production. And Paul, I'm thinking about our dinner with the person from the large healthcare insurance company. You know, this issue about model choice across, you know, small, medium, large models, you know, local models, on-premise models, this is a big deal for people who are actually in production. And, you know, they are very concerned also about the cost. They're creating custom software inside to allocate different kinds of inference across different models based on price, given how expensive inference is when you're really in production. So, you know, this whole architecture is a big deal. And you know, they're going to drop new models of the smaller models, right? The 7 and the 50 billion, you know, coming up, they said soon. And then this new application of, you know, putting you know, basically next generation selfie, if you will. I think, you know, this is quite a package here.
Yep.
I'll comment that it's so interesting the speed and the velocity of which the LLM production space is moving. For example, Llama 3.1, this 405 billion weights just came out yesterday. It's already on Perplexity. It's already on Hugging Face. People are moving at the speed of development, and that is so exciting in 2024.
Yeah, I just want to highlight one thing that we're seeing is those, and we're going to talk about one today. You know, those organizations that are investing in AI and Gen AI as a capability, you need at least 10% of your workforce, if not more, familiar with these models. And I said 10% because I think that's kind of a tipping point of having it actually infused in your organization. You know, regardless of where you get your, you know, models and inference, you need at least that kind of capacity to understand what the heck this means, as Nestle, we're going to talk about, has done inside their organization. Because if you don't have the organizational capacity to absorb this stuff, not only are you not on the learning curve, you're not on a learning curve that is moving at an incredible speed, and it's going to be very, very hard to catch up from
Yeah,
an organizational standpoint, not just a model standpoint.
totally.
All right, very exciting. Ankaj, next.
Okay, the next one is again from Meta. So while we have seen the release of its latest model, this is more of a strategy from Mark Zuckerberg on how Meta will be progressing in the open source world.
All right, David, go a little deeper on this one. The more, obviously you have deep expertise, have been opining on this for some time. What do you think?
Absolutely, and I may have hinted at it earlier, commenting as Ludo was taking on everything about the release. But truly, I think OpenAI and XAI and Anthropic and everyone are taking different approaches. Some companies are going proprietary closed models, others are going open source. Uh, at the end of the day, this is going to be when you think of scale, when you think of 10 billion people using trillions of devices every day, all the time, online, real time, how are you going to be able to run all the inference layer? What models are going to do this? And who are we going to trust? And this goes back to the analogy of how Linux became very popular. So back in the day, we used to have 80% of the world's machines were on Windows and Windows-based servers and proprietary software, and really difficult to manage and scale and update all the software. And over time, the Linux Foundation, basically with a lot of public support, with people like you and I as developers, started coding features, pushing updates, and made Linux a state-of-the-art operating system.
Sure.
So today, a very unknown fact is pretty much the entire cloud runs on Linux. It runs on Ubuntu. It runs on open source, not on Windows and Mac machines. So this is the claim that Meta's Llama 3.1 can take us in that direction. So in that sense, I'd probably push this as I'd say important. I think it's essential, but it's still we haven't seen the industry take enough of a move to adopt it. So I'd give it an important rating.
Yeah, I would agree. Is this also is essential in terms of understanding their strategy. The other thing is too, we talk about, here at Gen AI, we talk about 6 forms of capital. In the traditional, industrial market, we had financial capital, human capital, and natural capital. Goods. Materials and so forth, energy. In the digital world, we've got 3 new forms of capital: behavioral, network, and cognitive. And we've given away the behavioral and network layer basically for cheap or free services to the likes of LinkedIn and Meta and Google and so forth. But cognitive capital is very, very precious to organizations. So I think you have this symbiosis between the open movement and then the desire to own your own intelligence and not give it away to the cloud providers. And I think that's a very powerful combo, and we're going to see that happen. In addition, I think we're going to see an unleashing of new kinds of data in the developing world as they adopt the open source models and then do new functions like whether it's medicine or education and so forth. We're going to have billions of people interacting. They talk about running out of data. It's like, well, wait a second. Once I put intelligence in the phone and that phone gets to billions of people and they're doing new capability, we're going to have whole new data sets coming out of India and the Middle East and so forth that are going to teach us new things. So I think we're not going to hit that wall that people are talking about.
Yeah, we're getting really close to LLMs, the good open source LLMs becoming the operating systems, right? We are not really talking directly about it, but it's getting closer. And it's not only the parallel, it's actually potentially the reality of where we're going.
Yes. Yeah. I think people are, to your point, David, I think people are missing the fact that there's going to be trillions of devices, billions of people, and that these open source models are actually going to open new data streams, which are then going to drive the intelligence. It's going to be fascinating. Okay, next, Ankash. Very exciting. We can do nothing but downhill from here. What's bigger than a 4 billion parameter, open model?
Yes. So the next
Nestle.
one comes from Nestle. So Nestle introduced Gen AI to its employees last year in August, and now this article provides a review of how Nestle's employees have done and how they are saving 45 minutes per week using their internal generative AI?
Yes, gave this to myself for a quick review. I'm definitely going to give this an important, maybe an essential, just because it's such a good case study for a known company. And the thing that I keep, so let's say important for now, but I could go essential. The thing that I keep hearing, like I forget the name of the executive who runs Copilot and for Microsoft, and she was saying that the big challenge is people aren't educated enough for what is happening. We see in our own work that those organizations that are willing to commit and really integrate the robots into how they work are tremendously different. And this is, Ethan Mollick talks about a minimum of 10 hours of interacting with these robots. And I agree, at least that. And back to this, this point of 10% of your employees need to be really trained up on this. And Nestle is headed in that direction, because until you interact with these things individually and collectively, we don't know what the new design of work is. And the analogy, that we put out there and we like is this notion of power tools for knowledge work. So if you think about building a house today, right, no one thinks about taking out a hand drill or a hand saw anymore. And what's happening in all this, what we call WINS work, words, images, numbers, and sounds, is that people are basically using hand drills, and they have to really understand the tools enough that they can start to change. And this is a good example of it at Nestle. So I was going to give it an important. What do you folks think?
Yeah, I agree with important. I wouldn't go essential, but it's a great test case, and certainly is necessary in large companies to get that education going.
David, what do you
I think
think?
Yeah, I think the case study shows about tech enablement and why that's so important to upskill and reskill employees. In the past, we think about learning SQL and Python. Now it's about learning Gen AI tools, and
Sure.
they're saying 45 minutes a week, maybe a 10% lift in productivity. I think that might be very cautious on how low the lift is. I think going over the next few years, we're going to start seeing the lift be even more. Maybe it's 50%, maybe it's 80%. So really excited to see this test case.
Yeah, I agree with you, David. I think that people, the thing is that most organizations have an assumption about the productivity curve, which is based on traditional industrial thinking, right? So if you look at a hotel, for example, the productivity differential between the worst made and the best made is about 6x. Okay, so that's the bound of the distribution. In this kind of work, we're talking about 10x, 50x, 100x. A small team with these technologies, like 10 people with these technologies working in concert, are, I believe, capable of doing things that traditionally might have been done by 1,000 people. And we're just beginning to see that. You see it somewhat in warfare when you have the special forces, very small teams doing things that large teams used to do. But I think in WINS work, this words, images, numbers, and sounds, we're going to see productivity differentials that are going to be unbelievable. And whether or not large corporations can capture it, because it's very hard to pay people what they're worth when you have that kind of productivity differential. We saw, Google failed at giving, $10 million bonuses they were talking about 10 years ago. They can't, it rips the organization apart. So it's going to be interesting to see the interplay between the existing organization and startups as we get to this productivity differential.
I want to highlight, though, in addition to cost savings, this article highlights the advances in product development and product design and product new concepts generation. That is, I think, essential. And they give actually what has happened over from September last year, it's a reduction from 6 months to 6 weeks to generate a good product concept. And that's, I think, for me, I'm all about revenue creation. So I feel that is the revolutionary unleashing of the creativity that I think we're going to see much, much more.
Luda, if you could just speak up a little, as you tail off there, we start to lose your audio.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. Speaking up works great. And Michael Novak notes, hey, in a little over a minute, they're getting input from over 20 brands, although we don't know how they deal with hallucinations. Although one would argue that sometimes in marketing, hallucination is the game, right? So that's what creativity is about. All right, next, Ankash. We're gonna give this an important. Ankash, next.
The next one comes from a legal software company called Clio. So they have raised $900 million to power AI advances, and some of it is for generative AI as well.
All right. Well, Paul was going to pick this one up, and he's had to drop, so I'm going to start in on this one as well. Sorry to continue to take the mic here, but I was going to give this an important, maybe an essential. And the reason I make it essential is because, well, first of all, it details the fact that they are raising the stow, and Clio to me is like the SAP of law, right? They're talking about workflow management, different components in terms of productivity tools. Interesting argument by the CEO of Clio that says that, look, they're not going to get rid of lawyers. What they're going to do is they're going to open up legal availability for people. Yeah, maybe. But, having worked in a partnership, I'll tell you, the idea of, to a senior partner, of being able to live on half as many, junior associates and putting all that stuff in my pocket at the end of the year, which they do, I think they're going to drive labor productivity. In addition, so I said this is important. The reason I was thinking about essential is that everybody's got legal expense, any company of size, and some of them have a lot of legal expense. And so this is an area where not only can you vertically integrate some of this into, if you have corporate counsel, but also the ability to put pressure on your suppliers to get more for less. So I guess I'm going to go important, but I could go essential. What do you folks think?
David?
I think there's so much opportunity in the legal tech space, as John noted, for cost optimization. But I think it's not only that, it's how can you get quicker to getting a first input or to get a first opinion. And Clio's not the first company that's raising massive rounds here in the legal tech space. We've seen Harvey, we've seen others, we've seen the acquisitions occur. Even Thomson Reuters made a big purchase in the space last year. So I think not only we're seeing consolidation, but we're seeing an increase in access. And this is often an industry that's been guarded away, where we don't know the black box. We don't know how the cookie's made. I think bringing in generative AI into the space for clients is going to also speed up workflows, because we're going to have the humans plus machines for legal review.
Yes, I will tell you, here at Gen AI, we use the robots all the time on any, when we're doing an MSA with a client or something like that. It's so helpful to be able to just feed a legal document into the robot and say, okay, what are the key points? You have specific questions, put it in a tabular format. It's just amazing. And I think the productivity here and the access, to your point, I think we're going to see the same thing in medicine. We're going to see law and medicine completely reconfigured in terms of access and productivity.
I think important, John. I wouldn't go to essential, because it's just still, it's a demonstration, and a good demonstration that legal is raising money as a confirmation that it's real, right? But it's only legal, really.
Awesome. Okay.
One more comment I'll briefly add is this is a continuing trend that the incumbents are going to win and own market share. Clio is not new to the space, right? Been around since 2008, only now raising a $900 million round. It says something about the incumbents launching and scaling in the market.
Yeah, I think that, so much of the thing is about cognitive assets are impacted from a, if you think about it from an economic standpoint, right? They're generally not easily tradable. The cognitive assets and the cognition, the intelligence is usually in the middle of an organizational system that would tend to favor the incumbents because they have distribution.
Right, and they've demonstrated. So they raised $110 million in the Series E, I think. This is F, right? And they took that money and did quite a number of things with the customer base. It's something of note that they create vaults for each customer. So they have access to data, and they have abilities to help customers use their data intelligently, right? So now this amount of money just confirms that they can do that. So this is interesting.
And Michael Novak reminds us to proceed with caution here as we get into things that are less deterministic using these models in the law. Fair enough, Michael. All right, important it is. Next.
Okay, the next one comes from Cohere, and it talks about how they have launched Re-Rank 3 Nimble. So it's a faster re-ranking system for enterprise search and RAG systems.
All right, on this penultimate argument article, David, what do you think of Re-Rank 3 here?
Yeah, so a big fan of Cohere and what they're building in enterprise search for documents. I think Re-Rank 3 shows the continued efforts of the company to move forward in that direction. They're laser focused for RAG. So this is great to see the updates, though I see this as optional. I think back to databases like Single Store and Snowflake when they're adding new search capabilities for column store, row store, and you get a lift here or improvement there. I don't see it as anything foundational or transformational, but it's an incremental lift to show that they're continuing to lead in space.
All right, we get an optional. I would agree with optional. Luda, where are you on this?
Yeah, optional. Agree.
All right, optional it is. Good focus, optional product announcement. Next, Ankaj.
Okay, the next one is from Elicit, and it talks about trust at scale. So they have introduced an auto evaluation framework for high stakes LLM accuracy.
All right, Luda, this to me is definitely not written by a robot because it has too much word salad in it to have been written by a robot. Not to prejudice your thing.
Yeah, it's an optional article, but if you're interested in evaluation of what's happening and avoiding hallucination, like Michael keeps talking about, you need to pay attention. And we've reviewed, I think, just last week, how LLMs are used for auto evaluation and how do you use LLM with the humans and what do you need to integrate into this. In this article, you have a longer version of explaining how this can be done, but it's optional, in my view.
Yeah, David, what did you think?
Yeah, I think we're definitely going to move in the direction where it's not only going to be eval from humans. We are going to move into an either human and the robot, or robot only, or human managing the robot to do the auto evals. So I think it's an interesting concept. I think it's a direction we're moving in, but it's still slow to get there. Definitely optional.
Yeah, I found this article frustrating because it's like, we're going to tell you about how we're going to do scale and quality. And we're going to tell you how we're going to do scale and quality. And then they say, but this solution still has problems. We're going to tell you how to do scale and quality, but this solution still has problems. You know, it's like, come on. Give me a
But
break.
it's good stepping, like one at a time. They introduce the concepts,
Yeah.
go through them,
Yeah.
pluses, minuses. So literally, it's a very good education piece.
Yeah, but whatever. Yes, I hear you. Optional it is. All right, Ankash, what's the big tote board? All right, we've got EIO happening here. I think open source AI was also essential. So the top two should be essential. Nestle employees are important. Legal software company Clio is important, and two optionals. Well, we didn't mean to do it this way, but we have EIO equally weighted across the three. And I do think that this meta release, if we have a category of super essential, I mean, I think this is really big news. So folks should get on it right away. Certainly pay attention to David's posts on this, and I'm sure his podcast will deal with it as well. We're going to post on it, and this is really big news in terms of this family of models from Meta in the quasi open source realm. A lot cheaper to run, so they claim. We'll see. And absolutely essential for our AI leader, and also to understand Mark Zuckerberg and Meta's approach to open source, the Linux of the intelligence layer, perhaps. All right, everybody. Anything important, Luda or David, to announce? Anything from you or the stuff you're doing that you want to let our audience know about?
No?
I'm excited to play with Meta 3.1. Like, let's go into OS Studio or one of the layers and start playing with it. Compare it against Claude. Compare it against GPT-4 Omni. You should see for yourself how it stacks up. So very excited for the new model release.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Glad you joined us. Look forward to talking tomorrow. Bye-bye.